And somehow you've got to be able to say those things don't define my value.
Yeah.
It's my relationship with Christ, and he loves me, and it's God all power, but you have to focus on that. You have to feed that, and if you don't, you're going to pursue all these other things unhealthily.
Right,
I don't know if that's a word, but you just think, because, it's like if all of a sudden you wanted to make a movie,
right?
Well, how do you not determine your value based upon what production company is willing to hire you,
right.
what they're willing to pay you,
right?
And so I think a lot of times when we think, we tend to think about, what do I have to do to make God happy?
Yeah.
Because making God happy is going to make him pat me on the head and make me happy. Hey guys, welcome to the Troy Gramling podcast. It is awesome for us to spend some time together. We are just about to wrap up season 2 and excited about that. Now, really, we've done many. Our first season had 100 episodes. We're only doing 25 episodes a season now, but excited about the opportunities that we've had to talk about a lot of different things. When you think about all the guests that we've had, all the different topics that we've dealt with, I hope that it's been an encouragement to you. I hope that it's helped you reach your potential. And if you have some suggestions, leave it in the comments below. We'd love to hear what you would like to hear about, because that's the whole reason we're here, is that together we could grow and become, because like I continue to say, I believe with all my heart that you do have potential and that you were created for something of significance. And so whether it be what we do on the weekend or what we do in the podcast or even in the live stream that we do or the book that we wrote or anything else that we produce, it's for partnership. It's for community. It's so that together, it doesn't do any good for just one of us to succeed. And I heard from Nancy Beach years ago that one is too small a number for greatness. I truly believe that. So thanks for hanging out with us today. And we do have a special guest all the way from, we'll let him tell us where he's from and all that he has going on. Stanley, welcome to the podcast today.
Woo! It's good to be here.
Listen to the crowd. So tell us a little bit about yourself so everybody will know in case they don't. They probably do, but in case they don't.
Yeah, well, I guess because I'm usually, and this is kind of anxiety ridden because I'm used to being on the other side of the camera. My name is Stanley. I'm the video director here at Potential Church, and we produce a lot of the pre-produced videos here, including the podcast, SNL, and the other Troy Gramling series content.
There you go. So, and you are married?
Yep. Married for 8 years now.
And where'd you meet your wife?
I met my wife here in Miami, Florida. She's originally from New York, but she was going to school here in Miami, Florida, and we met. And then after 5 years of dating, we got married. I was only 23, so
5 years.
Right. Yeah.
5. In today's world, that's not a long time.
No, right.
But
before, right.
It's like. So did you know what year did you know you were going to get married?
I would say year 2. I knew I didn't know how to get over that acknowledgement. So I knew I wanted to marry her. I was like, this is the person. But it took a lot for me to get to that discernment or that decision of like, okay, now I can make that next move. You know what I mean? Because I was like 20,
Right.
And so just getting out of college, in college at the moment, and still trying to figure out life, and then have a partner who I'm like, I love this person. I feel I could see my life with her and so forth like that. But it was like, how do you get married? Do
you think she would have said yes if you'd asked her after year 2?
I think at year 2 she was already saying, "Hey, what is happening?"
She's already thinking about it.
Oh yeah.
If I'm going to give you some the better years of my life, where are we going?
Right, exactly. And she's at 21, 22 at that point. So she's like, hey, I'm getting older and so, you know what I mean? You're so young, you know? But I think a lot of kids were contemplating that at that time, you know? But yeah, 8 years strong, man.
Now you got twins?
Twin boys. It's been very active experience. Yes. Yeah. And now they're walking, they're running, they're climbing and stuff. So it's been very fun because I'm an active person. I'm not the one to go home and just kind of like just sit down. So I'm usually running around. So if they're running around, I'm right there with them. So they've been a blessing to us.
And they do run around.
They do run around.
They're very active.
Yeah. You've run around with them. You know what I mean?
Yes, very handsome boys.
Yeah, they get it from their mom. Yeah, I was very blessed on that part. Yeah.
Well, good deal. Well, thanks for being a part of the show today.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm running it. Actually,
you're actually you're the man in charge. That's what our super producer, Pastor Danny, told me.
Yeah. So, I mean, what I actually wanted to talk to you is kind of what I talked to you about when we were off camera, and a lot of it is about your experience, how you've grown in your leadership, and how you've been able to reach your full potential. You've even written a book about it, which has been extremely insightful, and looking at how Moses was able to come from speech impediment, not a leader, to then being pushed into being one of the most iconic people in the Bible. And I don't know, Nick picking out of that was really cool. The roundabout way is the thing that really sticks with me, because now I see it in literally every season or every part of my life. You know, it's like, all right, God has a plan for you, but sometimes it's not going to go directly the way that you think about it. You kind of have to, you know, he kind of takes you on a roundabout way that increases your faith. It makes you stronger, and it increases your endurance all the way. Anyway,
it's just not any fun.
It's just not any fun. But I think that comes with your perspective, though. What is fun to you? You know what I mean?
That's good.
Because ministry is the same thing, you know? Like, it's not, I wrote that down maybe two days ago. I was like, hey, ministry isn't a sprint, and it can't be. It's a huge marathon, and you have to be willing and prepared mentally to run that race, you know? And I think I've learned that a lot from you as well, is despite what happens, you don't, and it's one of my questions too, I never see you really get down or defeated, as opposed to as soon as something happens, I see your mind kind of, all right, how do we get out of it? You know what I mean? As opposed to like, oh, well, I guess we can't do it. Even when we've kind of come to you with like, hey, we can't do this or we can't do that. I sometimes stop myself from coming and be like, hey, we're not going to be able to do this. As opposed to, all right, how can we do it? Despite not having resources, despite not having time, whatever it may be, how could we change it for that? And so, yeah, so I learned a lot from you in that sense, and that's kind of what I want to dig into.
Sure.
So anyway, first thing you already spoke about was full potential. This is actually good for me, because I've always been contemplating, what does potential actually mean to you? So what do you think it means, reaching your full potential?
Well, I think of it in a couple of ways. I think of it, you know, the subtitle of the book is the uncontainable power of God within you. And so when I think about potential, I think about what God had in mind when he created us, right? So wanting, you know, Paul heard, well done, my good and faithful servant. You know, Paul made mistakes along the way. So potential is not about perfection, but I think it is about discovering what we were created to do and to be, pursuing that and making progress in that journey, and having peace. Yeah, because I think peace is a big part of it. Doesn't mean you don't have ambition or you're, you know, not pursuing, but I think in the pursuit, you're able to have peace. So to me, that's what I think of as potential. You know, and the hard part about that is it's not defined. Like, it's not $1 million. It's not, those are all goals that people want to set, you know, whether it's the size of ministry or whatever it might be. There are all kinds of different goals we can set. But I think the hard thing about potential is it's not subjective, but it's not easily defined because it's different for every person. And I can share with you some potential that I see in you, but it's only what I'm able to see. And that's based upon, how you present yourself and what part of your potential you've already developed. You and of course God who created you know your full potential.
Right.
You know, you may be 10% into what God had in mind. I see it and think it's 50%. And so I think people, if they're honest, I think a lot of times we tend to underestimate people's potential.
What do you mean? What do you mean?
Well, what I mean is that because I can only see what you have presented. And so I'm basing whatever encouragement I give you, if it's honest. Now, I can, some folks are always saying, you can do and be whatever you want to be and do. Right. Well, yeah, but no. I mean, we all have limited abilities. And so my perspective is going to be based upon what I see.
Yeah.
I'm not God. I can't see what skills, abilities, opportunity, that are within you.
Yeah.
And so I think we underestimate it because I see what I see and I think, well, he's this age, he's done this, or he's got this ability. Oh, here's where maybe you've got all this capacity.
Right.
Maybe you haven't applied yourself as much as I perceive you've applied yourself.
Yeah.
And should you apply yourself, your growth might come, really quick.
Yeah.
That first, let's say 75%. So,
yeah, so I'm connecting the pieces now. So like, that's kind of where our ethos, or that our partnering with people comes into play, where we want you to reach your. Oh man, I'm all figuring this out. That's where you're able to find your full potential, because like how you're saying, we limit ourselves, and sometimes we don't necessarily see the full picture. But once you do come into community with folks who intentionally are looking to expand that thought process or thing, that's where you kind of reach that goal of finding your full potential. Now, did you have all that in mind?
Like you say in the book, you look at Moses. If you and I were going to look at Moses wandering around in the wilderness, we might say, well, man, he went to school in Egypt, so he got a good education. Mm-hmm. He grew up in a nice home. But he's 40 years old, what kind of potential? I think we would have underestimated the impact he ultimately ended up happening. And I just think that's easy to do. And then we own that ourselves so often. And the hard part about discouragement you mentioned earlier is if I get discouraged, if I underestimate my potential, then I'm going to tend to maybe not pursue it as committed.
Yeah.
It's like, what's it matter anyways? It's what a midlife crisis is. I mean, a midlife crisis is when you reach an age where it feels and could be reality that what you dreamed of accomplishing, you don't have enough time to do.
Jeez.
And I think there's a part of that everybody goes through.
Yeah.
Because we all have big dreams, especially if you have any sense of ambition or any sense of, if you don't have a desire or ambition, then you're probably not going to have a midlife crisis,
right?
Because whenever it is you gave up on those dreams.
Right.
So you gave up a long time ago. But there are lots of folks who are very ambitious and, are pursuing with great passion goals and dreams. And then all of a sudden one day you wake up and you're like, wow, that's my whatever birthday, 40th birthday, 45th birthday, 60th birthday. And you're like, wow, I've lived longer than I'm going to live in all likelihood. And how many of those years are productive? You know what I mean? Year 20 to 30, right, is productive. The years before that are productive. Your kids now are learning things they're going to use their whole life.
Right.
But at what age are you alive? And doesn't mean you don't have value to add, but not towards the dreams you wanted to accomplish.
Yeah.
You wanted to lead your company to make $1 billion.
Yeah.
Well, are you going to do that at 80?
Yeah.
You might be able to be a mentor, but that might not be capable.
Yeah.
So midlife crisis to me is when you kind of awaken to that reality. And I think part of the reason is because our dreams are too small. We dream one generation instead of dreaming beyond I think sometimes God gives us dreams that are bigger than ourselves.
Yeah.
And that means,
I think all the time.
Well, yeah. So then you think, how are you going to accomplish that?
Right.
And that's hard, right? Because when you're in your 20s and 30s, it's like, I want to build that company.
Yeah.
It's not my kids. I mean, it's not that I want them to fail, but I want to see the company, or I want to make the $1 million, or I want to, climb the mountain, or whatever it is. And so I think,
is that all flesh right there? Because I contemplate that with even here, with my ministry, I have so many goals for it, and I contemplate, will I see it all? You know what I mean? And kind of like, where does my flesh start and where does it end? You know what I mean? And kind of come to peace with, I might not see it all, but by the grace of God, I've been able to put some stones down to be able to create a foundation for that. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But would you say a lot of that is your flesh kind of coming into play?
I'm sure it can be, but I think you only have to be concerned about that if you start to make decisions that are not good long term for the organization or the whatever family, whatever it is that you're leading. Up to that point, the fact that you want to see it shouldn't have a detrimental impact on it possibly happening beyond you.
Right.
Because to me, that's all that it means, right? If my dream is bigger than just my generation, all it means is that when I make decisions, I'm thinking about more than just my life.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean? So I don't, because I think a lot of times as Christians, we get more, I don't want to focus on the negative side. In other words, I don't want to focus on, am I materialistic? I want to focus on, am I generous? Because it's easier to me to say I want to be a generous person than it is to try to define materialism.
Right.
Because so many of that, like you just said, is that the flesh? Well, where does ambition end?
Right.
And the flesh start.
Right.
That's
right.
You could stop yourself from being. You could spend all your time thinking about that.
Right.
Wow, is that? I really want that to succeed. Is that because of me, right? And it's like, well, no, let's just focus on making decisions that are positively impactful for more than you.
Yeah.
And then you don't have to worry about the other.
That's good.
If you're generous, you don't have to worry about being selfish.
Yeah.
As opposed to trying to wrestle if I go home at this time, am I being selfish?
Yeah.
Or materialistically, if I buy this table, should I buy a cheaper table? Should I? Right? You can people mess up their lives. And most people in all those things, the line is personal. It's like you're materialistic anytime you spend more money than I can afford to spend on a certain item.
Right. Yeah.
And so it's just a lot easier, I think, to focus on being generous. It's a lot easier to focus on making decisions that will move the organization or whatever it is, the family forward, even if you're not.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, you think about your family and you think about, you can go out and buy a pair of shoes or you can get some insurance, and then you think, okay, maybe the shoes are selfish because should something happen to me, they're not going to be able to wear my shoes, but they would be helped by the insurance.
Living life selflessly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's focusing on the positive, not what you don't do, but what you do.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like, am I making decisions that's helping my family?
Yeah.
Not because the other side just seems so discouraging and so can be an overwhelming. People, I feel like people, and then we judge one another. You know what I'm saying? It's like if you're thinking about the shoe, then if I have shoes, now you're judging me because I have the certain shoes you didn't get, as opposed to focusing on, am I taking care of my family?
Right.
Because then if I'm not, well, then you need to challenge me.
Yeah.
But you don't necessarily need to challenge me if I've decided on shoes that maybe I'm in a different financial situation than you are, and I can have the shoes and take care of my family. Where and again, once we start judging one another, we rob ourselves of our joy. We rob ourselves. It makes us miserable people.
Yeah.
So I would just say to all the folks listening, if there's anything, that can make an impact on our ability to enjoy the life we're living, is always think about not the negative side of what you shouldn't do.
Yeah.
No, fight what you shouldn't do by being faithful to what you should do.
Right.
Oh,
that's somebody. Please clip that. Yeah, that was good, man. So do you think that you can define your full potential?
That's a good question. No, I mean, no, because I think what I mean by that is it's hard to differentiate between dreams and potential. So, and that's why you get discouraged. You know what I mean? Because that distance of, man, here's what I'm dreaming, and it's hard. I think you try. Right? I want to be as self-aware as I can. There's certain things I can do and I can't. There's certain things I do better than other things. You want to surround yourself with people who will speak honestly to you. Hey, here's areas of growth. Here's areas. You don't want to I don't want to surround myself with folks who are, you can do anything because you can't.
Yeah.
So that makes it difficult. I do think the more aware I am of my potential, I don't know, maybe you say that the more at peace I am, because I'm not trying
and
to
true peace though, not artificial peace that can be done by yourself. I think when you truly live within the confines of what God is saying that you should be doing, I think that's where that true peace comes from. Like, so we do a lot of impact stories of different people within our congregation, just kind of giving us life change stories. We record them, but I do a lot of those interviews. And for the most part, what I've always found is that when people did find their potential, it was them living less selfishly and allowing God to truly take control of their lives, to where they were able to be less anxious, to be less worried about this, that, or whatever, or to be able to release whatever addiction that they were going through and allow God to truly give them the peace that we know we can only find in Him. And then what that transformation brings is direction that can only come from God as well. And I think that direction leads you to your full potential, where you feel like you're walking and activating and working in God's grace. And I don't know, it just tends to help others who are around you, because you're thinking more, I think, less negatively, like you're saying, and more on the positive things of how you can actually contribute to your current environment in a positive way, and less worried about what's going on in your mind, and allowing God to truly just take care of you. Because He does say that He will take care of you, and you don't have to worry in Philippians 4. That you don't have to worry, that He'll take care of all that stuff. You know what I mean? Like, why would the birds not have to worry? Why would the lilies in the valleys not have to worry? But, you're worried, and you're His creation. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Well, you think social media, has made it more difficult, because in the sense that, because we judge ourselves in comparison to others.
Right.
And one, we don't know what's true. And so, what we're even comparing ourselves to. And I think it's always been that way. Yeah. Social media just makes us more aware of more people that we can compare ourselves to.
Yeah.
But, and again, as Christians, we just talk about stuff sometimes that we don't really experience, on a consistent basis. And sometimes we don't admit maybe how challenging it is, so that we can truly discover how to have peace.
Right.
Because what I mean, it's like, we were talking about the book, right? Well, I need to get my value from Christ, not from external things, right?
Yeah.
Jesus loves me, this I know, for the Bible tells me so. I'm important because He created me. All those things are true. But, the kind of deal I get with the publisher is based on the number of followers I have, right? So it's very difficult for me not to determine my value based upon what they're willing to offer me.
Dang.
I just think it takes a consistent, wrestling. That's why I think it's so dangerous to drift. If I'm not walking with God, it's challenging when you're walking with God.
Yeah.
Because there are all these external things saying how important you are.
Right.
And somehow you've got to be able to say those things don't define my value.
Yeah.
It's my relationship with Christ, and He loves me, and it's God all power, but you have to focus on that. You have to feed that, and if you don't, you're going to pursue all these other things unhealthily.
Right,
I don't know if that's a word, but you just think, because it's like if all of a sudden you wanted to make a movie,
right?
Well, how do you not determine your value based upon what production company is willing to hire you,
Right.
what they're willing to pay you,
Right.
right? I mean, and so I think a lot of times when we think, we tend to think about, what do I have to do to make God happy?
Yeah.
Because making God happy is going to make him pat me on the head and make me happy. As opposed to thinking, no, I'm hanging out with God because if I don't, I'm going to make myself miserable
Right.
because I'm going to compare myself.
Yeah.
Just naturally.
Yeah.
How many books did I sell? How large is the church that I lead? How many people came to Christ?
Yeah.
How many followers do I have on social media? How many folks downloaded this podcast?
Yeah.
Because how many people download this podcast will impact whether it's monetized, will impact the amount that it's monetized.
Right.
So those are all value things that we look at as value.
Right.
And so for me to overcome that, I can either try to will those things not to be important to me, or I can continue to try to say, no, I'm going to get up every day, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to hang out with God and I'm going to let him define
Right.
my value.
Yeah.
I'm going to be faithful to his house so that I can worship him.
Yeah.
I'm going to give my resources.
Yeah.
I'm going to do those things not just because I ought to, so God will make me happy or give me something I want, but I'm going to do those things because the reason God asked me to do those things is because it's those things that actually lead to the peace that ultimately we're all pursuing.
Yeah.
We just think
Literally.
the followers, the money,
Yeah.
the position is what will get us there.
Yeah.
Because we look around and that's what we see is important.
Yeah.
And so I just again encourages our listeners that when it comes, I think about the church, right? That community, that's God's idea. He said he was going to create it and he builds it. And it's not, again, you do good, you get rewarded. As an athlete, you practice hard, play hard, win the game, get the trophy. And we tend to think of our spiritual lives in the same way than really thinking through that the reason God asked us to do those things is it's kind of like exercise without competition.
Right.
You're not exercising to win a trophy. You're exercising because exercise is good for you.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing when it comes to, I think, a lot of our spiritual life.
Yeah.
It's not that we're trying to make God happy
Yeah.
so he'll do something we want.
Yeah.
It's that those things lead to the happiness that we truly desire.
Yeah, and I think you spoke about that this weekend too when you're comparing God's love to AI's love, or he used ChatGPT to kind of have this conversation where she ends up like motivating you in a place that you can emotionally get not convicted, but you can emotionally get attached to it and feel like this is true emotion. You know what I mean? And it's so far from the truth, and where it can kind of spiral you into deceit. And believing stuff that aren't actually true. And I think, it's a really hard place now because there's so many things out there that are giving you false validity, and that's giving you false direction, and that can really take you away from the true place or the true place where you're supposed to find your value and all those things. And so we just have to keep reminding ourselves. So, you know what I mean? Because I think that also affects us finding our true potential. So what would you say, I guess the last question, but how do you feel that, how would you say, I'm trying to figure out how to put it towards, how would you, I had it in my head.
How old are you?
Huh? Well, I was coming up with them as you're talking. I was like picking that and trying to put it together. But that's fine. What disciplines help you stay vision driven rather than simply goal driven, especially over decades of leadership, and that you could speak personally to you?
Yeah, I think, goals I think of goals. I mean, there's overarching goals, but it's the small steps, that I think goals are driven in that way. Like the goals are what you're going to do. That's the way I think about it, right? My goal is to, get in shape. And then you think, well, how do I get in shape? I think of vision as bigger than that. There's the wisdom writer, the writer of Proverbs says in 29, he says, without a vision, people perish. And that doesn't mean without a dream, right? It means without a word or without a revelation. In other words, it's bigger than just something I come up with. It's that sense of the why.
Yeah.
You know, there's the what, and then there's the why. Goals tend to often be the what. You know, here's what I'm going to do. Here's what I'm running after. When I think about vision, I'm thinking about why. And I think, you know, it's one of the great benefits of being a Christ follower is my why is really big because it's a God-given why.
Yeah.
You know, I planned on being a coach to, you know, build the next generation of athletes, you know, and hopefully impact them beyond just the basketball court. But God had a bigger vision. So I'm doing what I'm doing because I feel he tapped me on the shoulder. And so even if I get discouraged or I want to quit or I want to give up, right? Well, I can't. Why? Because of that word, that revelation, that vision, whatever, you know, it's what I, on some days, it's all that I have, right? God has called me to do this.
Yeah.
You know, I'm going to trust that in the end, you know, we're going to be successful.
Yeah.
And I just think that's, you know, goals, I don't think have that power. You know, goals can maybe get you out of bed at 6 o'clock to read or go to a conference or work out or whatever. You know, but they're limited, I think, in their ability to help you persevere.
Yeah. I found out, I remember my question, by the way.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. Before we run out
So,
of time.
all right. It was basically, so how does potential or finding your purpose or your full potential directly affect your leadership?
Well, I think when I think about potential and I think about leadership, I think in the sense that in two ways. One is I think you see everybody and realize that one of the great opportunities of leadership is to help people reach their potential, is help them to become everything. I mean, what better gift to give to somebody? And I feel like the task that whatever it is somebody does are to be leveraged to help people reach their potential, not just to accomplish the task. And so I think it impacts leadership in that sense. And then I think you think about your own personal leadership, the realization that wherever you're at is that you have greater capacity. You know, you made it. If I got this far, then I can take more steps. So it motivates you to continue to grow and to learn. And I think without potential or without the realization of potential, people stagnate. You know, it's like, I got this far, I'm done.
Right.
Like, well, you're not done until your heart stops beating, your lungs aren't taking in air.
Yeah.
You know, I've got more potential.
Yeah.
And I want to make sure that so it impacts my leadership because it keeps me growing.
Yeah. That kind of sits with like my idea of like retiring. Like, what does retirement? I was actually talking to my mom. I was just like, I don't think I'll ever retire. You know what I mean? Like, I would never stop working. Or excuse me, no. I told her my idea of retiring is that I will not have to work for finances anymore. You know what I mean? Like, I would be set up enough that I could just go do whatever I'm doing, but not have to worry about financing. But I was wondering what would be your take on what retirement truly is. Does it mean to like stop working ever, or are we saying that we're against that in a sense?
Well, I think if you think about retirement as no longer having any kind of any responsibility, then that would be a negative idea. I think there's seasons of life, and they all look different. And some of those seasons may mean, because ultimately, at the end of the day, a job, you know, to get resources is just that.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And so it's, who am I going to interact with? How am I going to carry out the greater call on my life?
Right.
You know, if I work, you know, you see retired in the sense that they retired from, let's say, their company, and now they're working at McDonald's or they're working at Disney. Well, you know, okay, maybe they need the money, but it's still, in a sense, they're not there for the money.
Right.
From God, I don't think from God's perspective.
Right.
Yeah, God's providing the resources they need, but they're around. Their vision or their potential is bigger than just the check they're getting from Disney. We've all been impacted by somebody who maybe be of retirement age or had retired from what they once did, but they're still carrying out their vision. They're
Right.
still encouraging or inspiring or
Right.
challenging. Or to me, retirement's when you give all that up.
Yeah.
And you go to Walmart, you sit on the bench, and you're just thinking about yourself.
Right.
That's to me a negative or you go fishing, and it's just you're not taking anybody fishing with you.
Right,
You're
right,
not. There's no purpose to your fishing.
Yeah.
I don't know that you could ever retire as long as your heart is beating from there being a sense of mission to whatever it is you're doing.
Yeah. So your full potential kind of goes with you until.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
It changes.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like potential as a pastor. Will I always pastor? Well, I don't know what the future holds. I don't know health. I don't know.
Yeah.
You can be at home in a wheelchair
Yeah.
and still have a purpose and
Yeah.
a mission,
But I think you've done that already, though, in terms of like diversifying. Like you're not just a pastor; you're an author, you're a podcaster.
There you go.
Yeah, you know
Come
what
on,
I mean?
baby.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
right.
yeah. Well, I wonder what would you say the next thing is?
Yeah, I don't think no, I don't know.
Yeah.
To be honest,
Yeah.
I mean that's my thing. I mean I know, I am 58 years old, so I'm just a few
58 years young.
Yes,
That's right.
So I think you have to, every season has things. Like you said, you had to see yourself married,
Yeah.
right? You're going to get married. I mean, not to say you're going to get married, but people do get married. But that's a different season. So
Yeah.
you have to see it
Yeah.
before you can actually experience it. And I think old age is not something we do very well because we don't really. We tend to push people that are older kind of to the side,
yeah.
pat them on the head, and it's, hey, we respect you. We just
Right.
don't listen to you.
Exactly.
Maybe in some of the cultures it's a little bit better.
Sure.
But I think every season, there's a revelation, there's
Right.
a calling, there's a destiny, a purpose, and then once you get that, then you're able to kind of wrap up maybe the season you're in and move towards that new season. But until you get that, anytime you move without direction, you're going
Right.
to end up in the wrong place.
Right.
So
You end up in a ditch.
that's good. That's good. That's true. Oh, I guess I'm going to wrap this up. I was waiting for you to wrap it up. Hey guys, thank you so much, Stanley, for being a part.
Absolutely. This was a great conversation.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll have you because Carson Luke used to.
Right.
I don't know.
I'm all right with that.
I don't know what happened.
I can take his
He
place.
had a baby.
Right. Right.
And you would have thought he had the child. But
I didn't say that, Pastor Carson, by the way. I'm not a.
anyways, it is great to have you. It's great to have you guys as well. Thanks so much for tuning in. If you heard something that encouraged you, challenged you, inspired you, click of a button and you can pass it on to somebody else, and maybe it'll make a big impact on their life as well. As I said at the beginning, that's the reason that we are here. Week after week, every Thursday, about to start that's my southern. Fixing.
Right.
That's what we really say if we're from Arkansas. We're fixing to start season 3. But I appreciate you going on this journey with us. Hey, hit the subscribe and the bell so we do some live streams from time to time. Check us out on Instagram and all the other platforms. We're there as well. And if you haven't picked up the book, it's the 1-year celebration. And hey, if you send me an email, I even have a Bible. What do you call it? A Bible study, I guess, or what do you call it? A workbook that we've dropped of recent that goes along with the book. But anyways, hey, and we got a live stream every Sunday night at 7 o'clock. God bless. Thanks so much for hanging out with us, and we will see you next Thursday. Don't wait till Friday or Saturday. We'll see you next time here on the Troy Gramling Podcast. God bless and have a great day. Wait, before you go, if you're enjoying our content, check out this interview or this one here. They're both really good. And don't forget, subscribe. It's really important. We'll see you next time.